On December 4th, 1974, 17-year-old Laurie Partridge left school early, saying she wasn't feeling well. She never made it home. Missing with her were a pair of Beach Boy concert tickets her dad had purchased for her for a show scheduled a week later. The night of the concert, police watched for her. In the sea of 4,000 people, Laurie was nowhere to be found. And though Laurie never showed, her tickets were used. Now, over 50 years later, Laurie Partridge is still missing. This is her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we are joined by Liz Vassey.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, today's episode is about a case that happened in the 1970s. And I think I said in one of our other episodes, we've been doing a lot of 1970s cases.
We have.
Yeah. The 1970s to me is pretty crimey.
Well, I think it was kind of crimey because I don't really know how much attention was paid to women. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Like women and protecting
yes.
women and scenarios with like domestic abuse or scenarios with like dating or hitchhiking,
right?
For example.
Yeah, because we just did the episode about the hitchhiking recently in the 1970s, which had some pretty horrifying sentiments about women. I mean, I don't know if we've really progressed all that much.
I don't know if we have, but I think it's like maybe less public. Because I mean, in that one about the hitchhiking, there was an actual newspaper article
with some pretty horrifying
that
quotes.
In regards to rape, somebody was like, the chicks dig it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, we're not doing that anymore. Or maybe we will be doing that. I don't know. Like, it's all who knows right now. But
yeah, I would also say the 1970s too is very serial killer-y.
Okay. Because maybe because we weren't up on like DNA and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of theories about why the 1970s and 1980s, maybe it's just like lead paint. I don't know.
Right.
But
got into like a definite like American Psycho type era.
Right. But today we're going back to the 1970s and I just want to hop right into this case.
Yes, let's do that.
It was around 12:30 p.m. on December 4th, 1974, when 17-year-old Laurie Partridge decided she'd had enough. Her menstrual cramps were so intense that she just wanted to go home. Her school, Johnny Ferris High School in Spokane, allowed students to leave early if their core classes were done. Now, that's not something Laurie usually did. As the advertising editor of the school paper, her afternoon routine was to go to the journalism room and then make calls to businesses trying to sell ads while she waited for her mom to pick her up. But with her cramps, she just wanted to go home. She called both her parents at work, but neither could pick her up. They suggested she just take the bus home when school let out. Not willing to wait, though, she found one of her sisters, Cindy, in the library and told her to tell her parents that she decided to walk home. The December rain drizzled lightly as she walked the 2 miles to her house, but she hoped that the fresh air would help her feel better. That afternoon, her mom was in a meeting when she was overcome with a terrible feeling. She didn't know why, but something felt off. When she picked up Cindy after school, she told her, "We need to hurry. I think something's happened to Laurie." It's the kind of motherly intuition that would prove all too prescient.
Her mom said that before she was even gone?
So at this point, her mom was picking up her daughter after school. So during the afternoon, she just felt really off. And yeah, so she said that as soon as Cindy said, "I think that Laurie was walking home," like her mom was like, "Oh my God, that must be it." Right?
Huh. That is like some pretty strong intuition there.
Yeah. Now, Laurie Partridge and her family were still relatively new to the Spokane area and really Washington state in general. Laurie was the oldest of Mary and Kenneth Partridge's 6 children. They had spent most of Laurie's childhood in Fountain Valley, California. But in the summer of 1974, the family underwent a radical change when her father's job, which was for an outdoor advertising firm, transferred him to Spokane. This was not a move that Laurie was happy about. She'd been dating a guy in California, and because of California's graduation standards, she had enough credits to graduate from high school in January of 1975. Even if she didn't opt for that, move would just mean not graduating with her friends, and this move would spoil all of her plans that she had. Now, Laurie was quite vocal about her dissatisfaction with being in Spokane. One of her school intake forms for John E. Ferris, she'd written that her goal was to return to California and graduate there.
Oh my gosh. So she's planning to, like, find an alternate
Yeah,
way to get home.
She's just like, this is not it, right? Now, Laurie's parents, they were not immune to her distrust. At 17, she was nearing adulthood and she was starting to make her own decisions. And so they offered her various options. Later, her mother would recount some of Laurie's dissatisfaction and how they were trying to help her. She said, yes, Laurie really disliked it here. She wanted to go back and graduate with her class. We sat down on her bed one night and talked about going back. And I told her if she really wanted to, we would make arrangements. So this wasn't just an empty promise either. Laurie's parents had some of their former neighbors who said that Laurie could actually just stay with them in California so she could graduate with her former classmates.
So were they going to be arranging that?
So these were their offers. Like, the parents were very much on board with trying to figure things out for Laurie, right? So they made these offers to her. But by the time those offers were actually made, it sounds like Laurie had just had a change of heart. Her mother said she got involved with the school newspaper and became the advertising editor. And then when fall arrived and the autumn leaves started to fall, she said she really loved it here. She also started going to the school's games and was making friends.
I wonder if it's also the option of being faced with, oh, then I'll be without my parents.
Right.
Like, because as a young person, think back, like, you think it's devastating to be away from your friends and your school, but then the flip side of that is being away from your parents, which is maybe even harder.
Right. And all your siblings.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's also like in opposition to your parents. Like, your parents are making you do these things. You're like, I hate it and I want to go back. And then they're like, okay, well, you can have this thing that you want.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, I didn't really want that.
It's
right?
not forced anymore, right? Now she has options.
Right. So not even though Laurie's California boyfriend could lure her back. Now, to be clear, it sounds like no one in her family actually liked this guy. He tended to be possessive, according to her sister Taryn, and her mother said, I will admit, we didn't like him much. That September, he actually came to visit Laurie, and he tried to convince her to move back with him to California, to even run away from home if it was necessary. And Laurie actually refused, and it seemed like not long after that, their relationship kind of fizzled out with Laurie ending it. So while the move had been difficult, it really felt like she was finding her feet. At some point, she met a man named John, and I'm calling him a man because he was 3 years older than her, and he lived with his family on a farm north of Spokane. The two became serious relatively quickly and started planning their lives together. Laurie, who was religious, liked that he was as well, and she started to see herself living on the farm with him, like raising animals and babies. And
so she's 17 and he's 20?
Yeah.
Okay. So now they're having this, like, life talk.
Right. Like, it's farm animals and babies and living the rural life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, by the start of December, the whole Partridge family was preparing for Christmas. Laurie had already purchased some gifts for her siblings, and Laurie's own gifts had come in early. Like, first, she had scheduled a trip for the Christmas holiday to visit her friends in California, and she was set to leave the day after Christmas. Also, her parents had gotten Laurie and John tickets to see the Beach Boys at the Coliseum on December 9th. After picking up the tickets at a local store, John and Laurie sat at Laurie's kitchen table, and John jokingly passed them to Laurie, saying she better hold on to them because he would certainly misplace them. And so she placed the tickets into her purse. And the two also made their plans to go pick out engagement rings on December 5th. So things were looking up for Laurie Partridge. When Laurie left school on December 4th, it was a fairly typical Wednesday afternoon. She'd walked home plenty of times before, and despite the chill and drizzling rain, she really did hope that the walk would ease her cramps and that the fresh air would help. Her family lived in the Browns Hill area, and it was, again, just 2 miles from school. So it's not an easy walk, but it's not exactly an onerous one either. So after updating her sister Cindy about her plans, she set off. Laurie should have made it home long before her family did, but when her mother and sister arrived home, Laurie wasn't there. And alarmingly, a check-in at her job at the Lincoln Heights Theater showed that she hadn't shown up for her job there either. Again, her mother had already felt that something was wrong, so the family started looking for her immediately, tracing the likely route that she would have taken to get home. Now, the route wasn't complex. She would have walked along 37th to Havana South, then to Glen Air Terrace before turning towards Custer, where her family lived. So it's a pretty easy turn, right? Most of Laurie's walk was past well-populated areas with houses along the way. Laurie's father, Kenneth, went door to door asking if anyone had seen her. Several neighbors reported seeing her walking alone in her blue coat, up until a certain point. About 2/3 of the way down Havana, the houses thinned out, and that's where the sightings stopped.
This is different than a lot of the stories we talk about because everybody's like right on it.
Yes.
Like right away, her mom, even before she knows she's missing, she's like, I have a bad feeling. Dad's going door to door. All of these people are seeing her and knowing that it's her because of this coat.
Yeah. So like there were people who were chiming in right away. Right?
Yeah.
So it was clear to most people involved that like something had happened to Laurie along her route, right? And the initial search for her by the sheriff's patrol units, you're going to be happy about this as well, was robust.
Nice.
They looked for her along the city, like out towards the city limits, south towards Tower Mountain. There were at least 3 city patrol cars looking for her around the school, and all of that, though, was without success. Laurie just seemed to be gone.
But at least they're doing something.
Right.
You know, like it's always frustrating. I know sometimes, like, it's going to be impossible to find, you know, somebody who goes missing, but at least have some effort.
Right. So, like, this search starts immediately that evening, which is not something we typically see. And Laurie's family, they scraped together enough money to offer a $500 reward the very next day. So, like, action is being taken.
On it, yeah.
But you're going to hate this part. It was clear that the sheriff's office was starting to think...
Don't say it.
That this just might be a case of a runaway.
Crap. You said it.
Yeah.
So they really did think that.
So,
this isn't your runaway kind of kid. She was already offered to go back home. Her boyfriend's trying to get her to go back home.
Yeah.
Like to California. She's saying no. She's got the job. She's got the new boyfriend. She's got this dream life planned.
Yeah.
She's not a runaway.
Yeah. And the school, like even her school, who, you know, they're just getting to know Laurie, they also were like, no, she is not a runaway.
No, they don't keep with that, do they?
Well,
ugh.
Okay, so they start gathering information about Laurie. And of course, during this investigation, they learned that Laurie hated moving. And so they began to conclude that she had purposefully run away.
That reinforced their idea.
Yeah.
But also, let's just say it once more, because I can never do one of these without saying it. Even if they're a runaway, we should still find them.
Right. Yeah.
That's all.
Like, seems pretty simple, right?
Right. It's so simple.
Yeah. Now, her family, though, they are insisting, like, this is wrong, right? No, she's been developing ties here. She's happy, etc., etc. But authorities, they just start to seem to back off the case. Now, during the very initial stage of the search for Laurie, an investigator had asked her mother to remember any detail, no matter how small. And her mind kept going back to that evening where John and Laurie had talked about the concert. Though the tickets for the concert were general admission, Laurie's mom remembered them talking about the ticket numbers they'd been given. Inside Laurie's purse, which was never found despite conflicting reports about this, her purse was not found, were the Beach Boy tickets for the next week.
What was interesting about the numbers?
So her mom was like, could we figure out something based on these numbers, right? Like, this is a big concert. Laurie left with these tickets. Like, is this something? Because she's ready to follow any angle possible.
Which is smart.
Yeah. So she's just like, whatever it is, right?
Okay.
We're going to follow it. So this was one of her tracks that she was going down. Now, she realized that if someone took Laurie, they'd also be in possession of these tickets.
Oh, I think I see where she's getting.
Yeah. So
here.
First, they contacted the store where the tickets were purchased, and the numbers her mom remembered were actually sold at that location. They weren't tracked, but they knew what numbers had been sold, right? This affirmed her memory that the digits were correct, right?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So knowing this, Laurie's family begged investigators to set up at the concert. They felt that if someone took Laurie, they reasoned that it was possible that person could use her tickets. At first, it seemed like the sheriff's office was amenable to this plan, but again, they were leaning into the idea that she'd run away, possibly because she'd felt pressured by her parents to get engaged to John. Like, they concocted a whole story here.
Okay.
Right. So as the 4,000 people flooded into the Coliseum that night for the concert, the sheriff's office was there, but operating under very different suspicions. With the press of the crowd, they opted not to look for the ticket numbers, stating that they didn't have the manpower to look at every ticket. Instead, they just looked for Laurie herself, scanning the crowd for the petite 5-foot blonde. After all, in their minds, they're looking for Laurie, who had run away, not for any sort of culprit. This to them seemed like the wisest course of action in this effort.
This makes no sense.
But of course, as we know, Laurie was not in the crowd.
Obviously.
Later, a search of the ticket stubs located Laurie and John's tickets in the pile. Someone had used the tickets, but it certainly wasn't Laurie.
So they could have, had they checked numbers, they could have.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some oversight.
It's one of those moments where you're like...
The mom is like spelling it out for them.
Yeah.
Like a very brilliant plan. I can't believe that, like, Laurie said those numbers and then she remembered the numbers.
Tracked down, confirmed that those were the numbers.
Right. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, the mom did all the work herself. All they had to do was look at the tickets.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, we don't have enough manpower to do that kind of thing.
God.
We'll be back in a moment. Now, after the concert, investigators gave few indications of where the case stood. The Partridge family, though, they remained steadfast in their belief that something had happened to her. By January, they were having trouble moving on in even the smallest of ways, opting to leave their Christmas tree up with all the gifts underneath it, unopened. We were going to take the tree down, her mother said. Her brothers and sisters wanted to leave it up until Laurie could come home and open her presents. By this point, the Partridge family was well aware the investigators thought Laurie had run away, but this didn't sit right with them. There were a whole bunch of reasons. So Laurie was supposed to be picking out her engagement ring the next day after she disappeared, right? She'd had the concert planned. She had the trip planned. Like, these were all things that she was looking forward to. But also, she had bought gifts for her family, spending her entire paycheck on them. She would have collected her paycheck, her next one, in a few days. So why would she leave without any money on her? And when investigators said that she left because she wanted to go back to California, that they pointed out, like, there was a scheduled trip, right? Like, she was already going in a few weeks. Like, why wouldn't she just wait until she got there? Yeah.
I was just thinking about that poor family trying to explain to them all the ways that they know she didn't run away.
Yeah.
And them just being like, but there's this.
We've concocted this whole different scenario.
Exactly. Because I don't know why that would be something they'd want to convince themselves of, but they did.
Right. And so they really wanted to emphasize, like, Laurie wasn't trapped in Spokane. Like, the investigators seemed to be thinking there were all these opportunities they had built in for her to actually take control of her life and head to California if that's what she wanted.
Regardless, she's a 17-year-old and she's missing.
Exactly. Now, her parents, they're desperate, and so they reached out to psychics, even borrowing $5,000 to find one. They connected with a man named Peter Hurkos, who was known for being involved in the Boston Strangler case. And Hurkos offered a few clues, saying that though the police believed she was a runaway, he saw her being picked up by a car by a man and a woman. Now, Laurie's mother, she wasn't so confident in this psychic's thoughts. She said, "I'm afraid I don't have much faith in him." But time, it dragged on without Laurie. No phone calls, no postcards, and under the pressure and despair of losing their daughter, Laurie's parents actually divorced. Later, reflecting on this, Mary said, "Our whole lives changed that day. My husband couldn't handle it." And then she added, "It's such a hard thing to deal with. Losing a child is awful, but this is the worst way to lose one. It's not like a regular death where you can one day just put it to sleep. You relive it constantly. Every time a body is found, every birthday, every Christmas, every holiday, it's always right there. What can you say to the other kids? How do you resolve it?" Eventually, in 1978, nearly 4 years after she disappeared, one of the investigators gave an update. He claimed that the maximum effort had been put into finding Laurie and that they were still following up on leads when they received them. But then he added, no physical evidence has ever been found that would indicate that there was any foul play involved. But the girls' parents, Mr. and Mrs. Kenneth Partridge, repeatedly told investigators they feared foul play. The parents didn't feel she ran away.
Because she didn't.
Right?
Right.
Now, he wasn't as confident about that, and he said, despite the number of hours I've spent on this case, I still have formed no real conclusions. I really don't know if Laurie is a runaway or if she met foul play. He goes on to say that they did run polygraph tests on people in other states, and though he doesn't make it clear, one seemed to have been Laurie's California ex-boyfriend, and no leads came from that. Again, Vanessa, we have talked extensively about young women and teenagers on this podcast whose disappearance were assumed to be running away. And so I know this is like
Too many.
always.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've talked about how, again, like as you've been saying, as I've been talking about Laurie's story, that like these cases should get just as much attention because when an underage person does leave home, they're much more likely to become victims of assault, homicide, sex trafficking, and so many other things, right? And we've seen time after time investigators actually ignoring parents who insist that their children just like wouldn't have run away, right?
Right.
But I just want to hone in here because this is actually was really interesting to me. It was one of the detectives who handled Laurie's case and something he said years later because I think it helps illuminate their line of thinking. And of course, it's one that I don't agree with. He said, when you get a missing 17-year-old girl, you give it a couple of days. Anyhow, there's not much else you can do.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awful. Oh,
Like-
yeah, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, it's just...
And give it a few days. Do you know how much bad can happen to her in a few days?
Exactly. It was so hard to like encounter that quote.
You just listed all the ways things can go wrong. I mean, and you didn't even go into like, I mean, there's
So many more.
so many more possibilities of what can go wrong.
Yeah.
And there is stuff you can do. If you can find a missing person who was taken because of foul play, you can find a missing person who ran away.
Exactly.
There's no difference.
And then you get them whatever services and help they need.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, he followed this up by saying that they were frequently fielded notifications from parents in situations like that who claimed that their children wouldn't have run away. And he said in his estimation, in his words, he said 90% of the time they don't know.
Okay, I want to flip that, right? Because I think 90% of the time they do know.
Right.
You know your kids. I know my kid. Like, you know your kid. I know my kids. And we know if they would run away or not.
Right.
Like,
But he says, oh yeah, these parents, they just don't know their kids, right?
no. Parents know their kids.
Yeah. Now, despite this, investigators did actually start to have to deal with the very real possibility that foul play did happen or that something else happened to Laurie. Because every time skeletal remains were found in the area, it brought Laurie's case to the forefront. For Mary, Laurie's mother, this placed her in a horrible position every time. She said, whenever they find a body, I always sort of hope that it isn't her. They found out that she'd been tortured or something. I don't believe I could handle it. She was just too good a person, too kind and concerned about everybody to have deserved that. Now, in the years since Laurie's disappearance, new investigators have actually taken over, and this new generation of investigators are coming to very different conclusions. In 2024, a homicide detective, Mike Drapo, said, somebody knows who took her and who killed her, if only the murderer. I think we can all agree she didn't run away. At this point, I think that's standard knowledge. Now, given that so many years have passed since Laurie was last seen, they now believe that she was a victim of foul play, and it turns out there's no shortage of suspects.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like we've talked about this a bit in other episodes about how horrifying it is to have conversation about like potential murders and realize that it could just be any number of people who seem to be actively kidnapping and killing people in the same geographic area. Right. And some of those well-known names from the Pacific Northwest had been at one time under consideration in Laurie's disappearance. But as new investigators take over, new pieces of the investigation have been revealed. For instance, back when she disappeared, some people had reported seeing a green or maybe blue Pinto station wagon with a California plate in the area, and some believed that they saw it following her the day she disappeared. Now, some other people have speculated that this could have been her California boyfriend's car since he had a similar one in a similar color. But again, this hasn't really panned out into anything.
Right.
And then in 2011, another report surfaced. A young woman who had been about Laurie's age had been in that area the day that it happened. And she saw someone resembling Laurie standing in a nearby horse riding field that day next to a white pickup truck. Standing next to her was a man in his 40s or 50s holding what she thought was a rifle. The young woman said that she witnessed this at about 4:15 p.m. When the young woman looked back, the person she thought was Laurie was no longer visible. And so when this woman got home, she told her mother what had happened, and later that night they saw a report of Laurie's disappearance on the news. And she said she reported this to the police, but nothing ever came of it. But now it might be actually one of the most solid clues in the case.
They never did anything about it?
Yeah, like I saw like potentially a man
With a rifle.
with a rifle.
And a girl.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. Now, once Laurie's case was treated as a potential kidnapping and homicide, the list of suspects did continue to grow. A few months after Laurie's disappearance, a man was arrested in connection with the abduction and sexual assault of a 10-year-old girl who he had left for dead. After this, he was questioned in regards to Laurie, and investigators learned that he had been in the Ferris High School area on an errand that afternoon, but again, nothing seemed to come from this angle either. Another man who has recently been identified through investigative genetic genealogy for the murder of a young woman named Chrisanne Baxter has been under consideration as well. Now, Chrisanne was murdered in 1978, so a few years after Laurie went missing, also in the Spokane area, and she'd initially been classified as a runaway. Her body was found about a month later, and this man had been previously arrested in 1975, just a few months after Laurie went missing, for the violent assault and rape of a 16-year-old girl. And he was released from prison a little over a month before Chrisanne went missing. So
there's a lot of possibilities.
There are a lot of possibilities. In addition to that...
Wait, one more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another man, he'd been convicted of 2 murders in the Oregon and Washington area, and he has admitted to killing roughly 30 women in that area during that same kind of time period. In 2018, he was questioned about Laurie, but he denied involvement in her murder. So that's why it's like so horrifying to be like, oh, it could be any.
It can be any of these.
Or none of these, because it could be just someone else.
Right. Could be anything.
Now, when Laurie went missing, her sister Taryn was just 6 years old, but she had built up so many fond memories of spending time with her older sister. After Laurie disappeared, the Partridge family actually moved back to California, and Taryn remembered asking her mother, Mary, what if Laurie comes back? And Mary responded, they will find us, and they will tell us. And that's because Mary knew her daughter wouldn't be walking in her front door.
Mm-hmm.
Now, eventually, Mary and Kenneth would actually remarry.
Each other?
Yeah.
Oh.
So after 10 years apart, but they were still without their daughter. When Mary died in 2004 and when Kenneth died in 2022, it was still without knowing what happened to Laurie. Taryn actually inherited much of Laurie's belongings and became the keeper of her case file. And she's become a force in getting Laurie's case heard. In fact, it's through an article interviewing Taryn that I first heard about Laurie's case. One of those efforts was a several years long effort to get Laurie's case featured on a deck of playing cards. Often distributed to inmates for sale in like prison commissaries, these playing cards will feature cold cases on them.
That's a thing?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, so they are circulated in prisons and, you know, the details are there, hoping to get leads, right? So the hope is that by distributing them to incarcerated people, like people will come forward with information.
I had no idea about this.
Yeah. Now, Taryn, she joined forces with a woman named Rita Amron, whose mother, Laura Marie Ritchie, had been abducted and then found shot to death in 1971 in Spokane Valley. Rita wanted her mother featured on the deck of cards as the Queen of Hearts, and Taryn, she wanted Laurie on the Ace of Diamonds. Now, these cards are now finally in distribution in Washington state, and to date, apparently they've contributed to 9 cases being solved. And unfortunately, neither of those were Laura Marie or Laurie. Still, the hope is now that someone might come forward with information. Taryn said, it's worse not knowing. That's the big thing. It's worse not knowing. We really need to solve this one way or another.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, Ace of Diamonds, read by Liz Vassey. Liz joined the cast of All My Children at age 16, earning her first of 2 Daytime Emmy nominations. Since the soap, Liz has appeared as a regular or recurring character on 14 television shows, including CSI Crime Scene Investigation, ER, 2.5 Men, Maximum Bob, Necessary Roughness, Brotherly Love, NCIS LA, Fox's live-action version of The Tick, the reboot of The Tick on Amazon, and A Million Little Things. In addition to acting, Liz is an accomplished writer. She has sold 8 television pilots and a TV movie, developing for such networks and studios as Netflix, NBC, Freeform, CW, Warner Brothers, Universal, and CBS Studios. An avid runner, Liz made her directorial debut with the documentary feature The Human Race, which focuses on unlikely athletes. It was named by Runner's World as one of the top 20 best-running documentaries that will help inspire you to move.
Ace of Diamonds. Laurie Partridge, 17, missing since December 4th, 1974, from Spokane, Washington. Lean in. I'm ready. Let's lay down the most valuable card in the deck. We'll say it's a symbol of good fortune, new beginnings. I don't know how to play this game, what hand to hold, but we've all been taught the rules. Listen past the rain for the slowing of a car on wet pavement. Hold your breath, steady your heart, so you can hear what's coming for you. Here, let me set this deck down on the cold kitchen table. Pick up a new one. I want to build a hand of queens. Give me a chance to turn over a sword, one so sharp we could fill this world with diamonds until it sparkles.
For more information about our show or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.